Welcome to Managing Sexuality Intelligently with Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist. My name is Jason.
And I'm Steve.
And we are two guys hanging out having a conversation about sex, sexuality, all the stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, human sexuality in general, which includes a whole lot of things, but particularly managing all of that intelligently, which is, I think, a phrase nobody but me uses. And I hope listeners start thinking about managing their sexuality intelligently the same way we all hope to manage our workouts intelligently and our healthcare and our finances and our careers and all of that.
Exactly. I'm doing it. And it's great.
Well, so what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking, the topic is moving beyond the 5 love languages.
Again, didn't we just talk about that?
You wrote an article on it for Psychology Today.
God.
So that's why I wanted to talk about it so we could expand on it a little deeper.
To talk about living in my head, I can't believe it. I thought I would have sworn we'd already done a podcast on this. So, moving beyond the 5 love languages. And what's the name of that author who wrote the book?
So the author is Baptist pastor Gary Chapman. He introduced the theory of the love languages 30 years ago. And so what happened was you sent me a Washington Post article, and then you decided to write a Psychology Today article about the love languages and how they're a sham.
Well, I'm a typical guy in so many ways. And, for those ladies out there who don't know it, and for those men out there who've never been able to tell the truth, women a lot, when it comes to self-help books, generally they're purchased by women. And everybody in the industry knows that. So a book like The 5 Love Languages or Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, those books get purchased generally by women, and well-meaning wives and girlfriends give them to their husbands or their boyfriends or both, if they're open-minded. And that was hysterically funny. That's how I know Jason's not really listening to me. So They give these books away, and then the guy, if he wants to have sex, and if he wants to have a happy relationship, and I mean superficially happy where she doesn't disapprove of him, not truly joyful and fulfilling, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I started reading that book. It was really good." And meanwhile, it's in pristine condition on, in his apartment somewhere at the bottom of a pile of other things. And he's never read it. I've had so many guys have come to my office and say, "Well, have you ever read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or any of these other books?" And they'll typically, and I'll say, "Yeah, actually, I did look at that book. I really hate it." And they look at me like, and it's like saying, "I hate Jesus" or something. Mm-hmm. And it's almost heretical. And they'll say, "Well, my girlfriend gave it to me." And I'll say, "Have you read it?" "Well, no." "How long ago did she give it to you?" "Well, a year ago." And it's, but let me guess, you've never told her that you haven't read it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's awkward, but these books are generally written, whether they're written by men or women, they're written for a female audience. And frankly, most of them are just BS. They're just totally useless. So they're either too complicated to be of any use. Here are the 47 steps you need to take to have a great marriage. Mm-hmm. Or they're too simplistic and really silly, just childish, to tell you the truth, saying that there are 5 languages that 5 ways of communicating love to someone, and that these 5 are the only ways or the main ways humans do this. And when the reality is, and the science has come along and investigated these claims, and these 5 love languages really don't bear out under scientific rigor. So in the experiment, and I'll let everybody do their own search on this because these articles have been distributed far and wide, but in these podcasts, I'm not really trying to be the know-it-all who says this is the truth and this is not the truth, but to encourage people not what to think, but how to think. And when somebody comes along and says, well, here's an esoteric thing you've never heard before, and you should, read this or know this, because if you don't, you'll just never have love in your life. Well, that's just silly. It's just ridiculous, because loving people, people who are capable of truly giving and receiving love, appreciate all the manifestations of giving and receiving love. And it doesn't matter whether my partner says something complimentary, or she does something kind, or she is just along for the ride, spending time with me on a given day. All of those things are pleasurable and enjoyable because it's clearly an act of love on her part. And my one of the things that's not on the list, and perhaps because he was a pastor, but it's sort of it's the elephant in the room, and it's kind of funny. I think one of the things that's not on the list, if you're listening to this podcast regularly, would be sex, because sex is a lot of people's love language.
Yeah.
If someone is willing to have sex with me, consensually, of course, in a heteronormative relationship, because I have requirements, then that would be something where I would interpret that as very loving. And many people go so far as to say, yeah, that means she's in love with you, Steve, or that means he is in love with you, Susan, and that a lot of us erroneously think that because somebody flirted with us or said something kind or had sex with us, that's definitive proof that they truly love us and care about us, when there are actually a lot of reasons why people would do those things. One would be selfish pleasure, in the case of sex. Another would be they're really interested in that multi-million-dollar inheritance you just got, and they were thinking of their last partner the whole time they were with you. Or, why would people compliment anyone? Well, to gain favor, to curry favor with another who otherwise might not like them or be interested in them, so they can get a better job or have some other advantage in life. So there's the legit, real deal, genuine love that people can give. And then there are the fakes and the phonies out there. But what if they're speaking a love language to me and it's my love language? Well, then that just would mean you're really easier to fool if you're fooled by the inauthentic, if something that isn't genuine. So moving past the 5 love languages, I hope this isn't going to be a long podcast, because again, I don't have a lot to say. I wrote the article for Psychology Today because I just thought about how grateful I was to see somebody drive a stake through the heart of this book that's been around forever. And the guy's made his money. You don't have to feel guilty about not buying his book anymore. He's made millions of dollars off this book. So did the guy with the Men Are From Mars book. But it doesn't, I do think relationships are fairly simple to understand, but that doesn't mean they can be understood thoughtlessly. I think we need to really put some intelligence into it and really think about things and look at things in a conversation with others like we're doing right now, because other people and the conversations we have with them and their perspectives, it helps us all to get smarter. We have genes that don't get activated until we're socially engaged with people. And these social engagements in cities serve to generally, and I'm sorry to say this if you're living in the country, but people in cities test out as smarter than people who live in the country. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't geniuses living in the country, because of course there are, and that doesn't mean there aren't, what did we call them in the last podcast? Fucking morons. There can be morons living in the city as well. But in general, on average, the IQ of people in the city goes up because of the very thing that we're doing right now, talking to each other.
So there is a lot to talk about here, even though sometimes you think there isn't.
Well, you say that, but really, what is there to talk about?
Well, first, what are the 5 love languages?
Oh, God, I don't have them memorized.
Well, there's touch, right? Physical touch.
Okay. So an arm around the shoulder or something like that.
But can touch is that just a nice way of saying sex too? It's too vague
for me. For me, it's all touch. I mean, my understanding of the book, which I have not read, but I have glanced at, and I've read about the book, so that's the limit of my knowledge.
Maybe you need to read it, and you're like, hey, this guy is right.
Well,
I was way off.
Well, it's a thing he just came up with on his own, and it was based on his observations of working with couples. And I think that there are a lot of things one can come up with, and I think there's some good theories one could come up with. But for every good theory, I think there's about 20,000 bad theories that come up, or 20 million bad theories that come up, because we all develop theories about the way the universe works. So you were telling us about the 5 love languages. Okay, besides touch, which maybe includes sex.
Then we have quality time.
Okay, sharing time with each other.
And then acts of kindness.
Yeah.
Words of affirmation.
Okay.
And receiving gifts.
Oh, not the giving of gifts, just the receiving of
it. This says receiving. It could be maybe both. Just gifts.
I think gift giving in general, yeah, that could be a way of expressing love. And I think everyone listening to this could agree, yeah, those are all ways of expressing love.
And the concept, though, is it's like, so I'm a guy and I'm like, oh, here's what are your 5 love languages, or what are your top 3? And then I go look at the list, and then I say quality time, touch, and acts of kindness. And then the idea is then I go to a girl or she goes to me, and then we compare. And then we say, oh, we're both quality time and touch and acts of kindness. We are a match.
Yeah, right? Yeah. That's and in his practice, he would tell people that and also you need to learn to speak the other person's love language. So if you married before foolishly not reading his book, then you should, if she is, let's say, into quality time, which means no touching. Just time. Yeah, if we can just have that quality time, then maybe if you want some touching, you might get some after a couple of weeks of quality time. And, I'm making fun because hopefully, a couple would have some touching, sexual and otherwise, before weeks go by. But I think that was the deal in his therapy, would be negotiating with people. And so that if you could learn to speak her love language or vice versa, then you would have a more enjoyable marriage. And, if you're sorry to say, if people are so limited in their thinking that they don't realize giving of a gift is an act of love and that the proper response is gratitude, and I mean, assuming that you like the gift.
Yeah. I got a lot of gifts I didn't like throughout my years.
Yes.
From my aunts and uncles, or my aunts. I mean,
and maybe a girlfriend or two here and there.
Yeah.
And that's, like when she gave you the 5 love languages, something like that, where, oh, thanks. Gosh, I feel really loved now. That, for me, it would be one of those stereotypical moments where it's the thought that counts. It's nice. But what was the thought? When we give a book like that to somebody, it's usually, especially a partner or a would-be partner, it's usually because we're trying to fix what we see deficient in them. Or we want him to really understand where we're coming from, and he doesn't really get that. Even though I never want to be touched by him, I still love compliments and little words of encouragement. And I get it. Why humans would do that. It just seems so utterly inadequate, and I think so inadequate, and at the same time cluttering up my mind with useless information. Like if many times I'll ask my clients in my office, so are you really clear on your wife or your husband loving you? Yes, I know that they love me. Okay. So I want to ask you a different question that's going to sound related, but I really want you to think about it. Do you feel loved? And there is most of the time when I have to ask that question, I'm greeted with a long silence that in its duration is the answer.
Yeah.
If somebody has to really hunt in their memory for a memory of feeling loved, then yeah, they don't feel loved. And then the question is, well, what would it take for you to feel loved? We don't need to read a book to get to that answer.
Well, what if they just need some quality time?
Well, you're saying that with like a sparkle in your eye and kind of a wry smile, and I'm assuming you probably dated her. So, but what would, we all have an answer to that. And I remember asking one potential partner that question, and she said, I don't know, what would it be for you? What do you need to feel loved? And I said, well, somebody who looked at me in a genuine, authentic way and said the words, I love you, once a day, that would work for me. Kissing me like you really meant it.
Yeah.
At the beginning of a day and the end of a day in a marriage, that would work. And having sex like you liked being with me, that would be enough. Those three things, and I'd be like at a 10 every day.
Yeah. Give me flashbacks to my last relationship.
Why? Because it wasn't
like all those. I remember like asking for those things, and I don't want to like talk bad about. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to like talk bad about my ex, and she was a great person. Or we just weren't able to communicate what we needed to communicate. But one time I remember saying something like that. I was like, I noticed that you don't really say I love you like to me ever. It's like, it'd be nice if you said that. And she was just like, I didn't, it was like, it was just like,
I wish the people listening to this could see your face. It's like, yeah, it was a perfect demonstration of somebody who was like mildly nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, I was able to express it, but it was like she was just like not into it, and me not again having the tools or the ability to say, okay, that's not going to work for me, and leave the relationship. I continue to stay in it after even that, and it's like and even like kissing, like it's like it'd be nice if you like came up to me and kissed me, and it was just like I was aware of that she wasn't doing these things, and it was just like,
I think the word for me, and I'm going to guess most of the listeners here would like what I would call a socially extravagant display of love. Like, oh yeah, somebody who would say, yeah, this is my partner, I'm crazy about them, or this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend, and my reason for living. Yeah. Where that full-throated affirmation comes across. And I remember the first time following my divorce, I had a girlfriend, and it wasn't a long relationship, but I just remember she kissed me in front of my children, who were somewhat uncomfortable seeing that. And then she pulled away from me, but held on to me and said, I'm sorry, girls. It's just that I'm so crazy about your father. And I think my daughter's jaws dropped because they'd never heard anything like that from their mother. And then a year or two after that, I had a different experience, but a similar one that's unforgettable. And someday I hope she hears me say this, because it just meant a lot to me that she had her mother visiting. I came over to pick her up for a date or something, and she kissed me in front of her mother in a way that was, again, a full throated affirmation of, I'm crazy about this guy. And I think it may have helped because both of them were Italian. So maybe that was part of the answer there. And I'm not Italian, but maybe I should just only be with Italians from now on until death do us part.
Yeah, I'm taking notes over here. Italian women.
But right. But I don't want to be, it's not like I need somebody to be over the top with touching me in public, or, I want to be socially appropriate. I don't want to be creating a scene or a scandal. And it's just that I really want it to be perfectly crystal clear to me and to everyone who knows us that this woman is crazy about me. And I want that because I know I have that love to give. And, with my current wife, we've been together going on 30 years. It's been easy to maintain that over that 30-year time span. It's been really easy to make it really clear to my friends and my family that I'm crazy about her. And she does the same to anyone who comes in our path, that we're very, very happy together. And we don't take little pot shots at one another when, some subject comes up, even if it's a subject we have diverging opinions about. So I think that's, and in the context of that authenticity, yeah, of course, there's gift giving, there's quality time, there's touching, there's words of affirmation, there's all of that. But there's also, I forget who it was. I think it was a poet who said, they also serve who only stand and wait. And he was talking about people serving their country in the military. But I don't need someone to be actively loving me for me to feel loved, because of the nature of the relationship. I feel my wife's abiding love, whether I'm with her or not, because she has made it so affirming that I can be on a trip miles away from home. I can be away from her for a long period of time. And she and I have done enough thought experiments, because I have a forensic practice in which a lot of my clients either are on their way to or from prison. And so I talk to them about relationships and what's happened. But I think if I actually went to prison, or if my wife did, I don't see us ending our relationship at all. I think it would just continue on and be very warm and connected. And there'd be long letters going back and forth, probably on a daily basis. And it would be, I'd still feel the connection, even though we were separated from one another. So it's, I just think feeling loved is kind of the goal. Why would you get married to somebody where you cognitively understand that they love you, but you just really don't feel it too often? I don't understand why anybody would do that, but we all have.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've done it.
Yeah. Many of us at least have done that. I know I have. And I think it's because I forgot, oops, I'm a person too, and I have needs too. And I need to take care of myself and find someone who's crazy about me. I think one of the best breakups I ever had with a girlfriend was, I think this isn't really working for me. I'm not really the right guy for you. And she said, oh no, I love you and I'm crazy about you and all of that. And I said, this was the first time I was honest about this, and that's why I remember it. I just think you and every other woman out there deserves a man who's crazy about them. And I just don't have those kinds of feelings for you.
Yeah.
And I love you enough to want you to be with someone who has those feelings for you, because I think you deserve it. So when she heard that, it was like, okay, I need to let go of him, because that was really clear. But it was hard to say. But how many, it's probably been more true than not when people do break up.
Yeah.
I don't have those kinds of feelings for you. It's not like we want them to die and rot in hell and we hate this person. No, this is a person not so long ago we really loved, or at least we thought we did, or we love them, but we're just not compatible. And we're really not crazy about the way her bird in her cage, molts and throws bloody feathers all over the house.
Was that part of the reason? Is this real? That she had a bird?
Oh, it's just a different girl. I'm pulling different girlfriends out of my past, and there's, it's for those of us who are loving people, it's going to be mission critical to realize that this is a strength, not evidence of a superficial personality. Falling in love easily is a wonderful testament to our capacity to see that which is truly lovable about a given human being. The problem would be when we think, kind of like the Beatles, love is all you need. When really, to have a successful relationship, love is a necessary but insufficient condition for a successful relationship. We need things like, an easy one would be sobriety. Another one would be respect. Another one would be compatibility. So I can fall in love with women who have a substance abuse problem. I have no trouble falling in love with women who are mentally ill. I have no trouble. Historically, I recognize that I've fallen in love with women I'm not compatible with. But then when you do the further research and you do get to know that person, you realize, yeah, I love them, but I really don't have the kind of love that's enthusiastically looking forward to sharing moments with them for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that particular kind of love I don't have. I had the love at first sight love. I had the love by the end of the first 2 weeks love. I had the love that took us to the end of 3 months. But then something happened and I saw that, yeah, this is just not going to work out. So love languages, what if you're, what if you're fluent in all the identified love languages, but you just don't love that person or they just don't love you, but because of religion and a sense of responsibility or perhaps pity, they feel sorry for me. So they stay in the relationship, or I am confused and I mistake pity for love and I stay there, or I mistake religious obligation for a sustainable relationship. And so I don't want to get a divorce because that's a sin. So I stay, but am I really doing this person a favor? I would say no. I mean, you're really not, by staying with somebody you're not crazy about, somebody you don't really love. And I'm not talking about, an effervescent sort of love that just would disappear over time or dissipate over time. I'm talking about, a passionate love that endures, and it has reason to endure. It has a foundation of an abuse-free relationship based on equality. Well, of course, I could imagine that relationship lasting the test of time. And whatever that test is, whether it's our time is all too brief because somebody passes, or it's one of those, Guinness Book of Records kind of relationships that goes on beyond what is even conceivable. I can imagine science taking us into a century of marriage in the future. And so can we do that? Yeah, I think you can do that if you lay the proper foundation. But I don't think you're doing anybody a favor to learn their love language and know what makes them feel loved and mimicking those behaviors when you're not actually feeling them.
Yeah. I would want to say too, like in the article that you wrote for Psychology Today, you were talking about it's less about love languages and also about, or less about love languages and more about people's ability or capacity for love. And if you have that, if you understand that capacity for love, that understanding and that openness allows you to do infinite love languages.
Yes.
So that's kind of like where you hit on there. So can you kind of explain?
Yeah, it's like you have the Star Trek universal translator inside of you. We evolved a brain that is capable of picking up on very subtle cues. And whether we really love someone or not comes out in the way we speak to them, the tone of voice we use, the thoughtful little things we do through the day as we interact with them. I don't need to be focusing on any of the so-called identified love languages. I just need to ask myself, do I really love this person? And with my partner, I remember falling so deeply in love for the first time in my life. I recognized I love her whether she's my partner or not.
Hmm.
If she just came to her senses and decided she wanted to trade up, I would still love her. And it wouldn't be devastating because I've already taken out an insurance policy called having a great life. I have a life worth living. So if my beloved were to leave me, it's not like my life gets handed back to me like some sort of booby prize with the sound effects, wah, wah, wah. No, I mean, I still get my life, but because I love her, I really want her to be loved. I want her to be happy. And we have a standing challenge in our relationship. If you can find somebody who loves you more and makes you happier than I can, by all means, go for it. And that challenge has never been responded to, by anybody who could do that. Because if you've laid that foundation, we're all pretty simple in the end. And you're getting your needs met, and you're happy, and like, what are you going to trade all that intimacy for? Some new stranger you'd have to start all over with.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much joy in this ability to give and receive love. And for those out there, and I'm sorry to have to say this, because I don't think mental illness should be stigmatizing.
Mm-hmm.
I myself have had mental illness. I've been depressed. I've had family members with depression and substance abuse problems, and with far more serious mental health problems than those. But if we're with someone who desperately needs treatment, and instead they sought a girlfriend or a boyfriend, their ability to give and receive love is definitely going to be impaired by their mental health inadequacies. So good mental health is a prerequisite to being in a successfully loving relationship. And for those wretched few out there who've been involved with the 19% of the population with identified diagnosable personality disorders, they are impaired in their ability to give and receive love. So that's one reason why you really want to be on your game when you're doing your intentional interview, listener, because you really want to be sure you're talking to someone who has the capacity to genuinely feel loved. And you can find out, like, by just asking questions and observing, do they feel loved by their friends? Do they feel loved by their family members? Do they feel loved? Did they feel loved before their spouse passed? Was their life a happy life in that sense? And there's so many people who can't do that. And it's really, if you think about it, it's sort of the highest function of the human species. People who are incapable of giving and receiving love, we routinely describe them as inhuman.
Mm-hmm.
They're human-shaped objects, but they're not capable of that which makes us truly human. And to take a word that's derived from humane, you're humane when you're a loving person, when you're a caring person. So this business of love isn't romantic fluff or the stuff of schoolyard romances and puppy love, that kind of thing. It's really mission critical to having a happy life and getting your human needs met. If you're the kind of person who gives and receives love, I'm going to throw a caution flag at you and say, hey, just realize not everybody who looks human is like you. Because if you've never met any of these people, you're going to learn a lot. I'll just say that. So be very open to the idea, if you're in one of these miserable relationships, or even a relationship where the person is capable of giving and receiving love, but they just don't really love you as an individual, then you have to remember, oh yeah, that's right. I had a great life before I met them. I have a life worth living should they leave me. And I need to talk about maybe moving on with our lives.
Yeah.
Because life, again, it's just too short to be sticking into a relationship, I think, that is not loving. Why would we do that? That makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, it's easy. Like now, thankfully I've been almost out of my relationship for almost 2 years in February. So it's like the pain of all that was so painful, and like being in something like that and I don't know. It's like you get wrapped up in these relationships and you don't even know what's happening sometimes. And
Well, we all have.
yeah.
Gosh, every single one of us. I don't know if I've ever told the story on these podcasts, but I remember I was out for a walk and I was in a county park, and I was at the very entrance to the park, and it was a quiet day during midweek, and a van drove up, and a man jumped out from the driver's side, and a woman got out of the van from the passenger side. And then right in front of me, they were about 30 yards away, right in front of me, he slapped her. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, do you think that little of me as a man that you would do that in front of me? Is this, are you throwing down a gauntlet? Are you daring me to do something about this? Because I am going to do something about this. And I just stared at him. And then thankfully a park ranger came by on his little putt-putt golf cart kind of vehicle. And I said, I just witnessed a crime, domestic violence, and I need you to call the police and get them here as soon as possible. And he did. And I wrote down, the man saw that I was looking at him and not walking away. And he then got back into the vehicle and hustled her off, and they drove off. And eventually the police did come and they arrested them, and it was, and he was prosecuted, and it was all taken care of. But about a month after the prosecution was complete, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the woman. And she was a professional psychotherapist.
Wow.
Highly trained.
How did they know it was you?
Because I was the key witness in the trial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's public record, and
so you did do something.
Yeah, I did. I did do something about it, and I because I'm not. That's just unacceptable behavior for me, and she told me it had been. I mean, she told me in her letter that it had been going on a long time, and she was very ashamed and confused about having allowed herself to get to this point. And I'm thinking, even right now, I think this could happen to any one of us. And that's why I think proper sex education in public schools need to include lessons on the abuse-free lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because if we don't recognize it, if we don't recognize abuse when it's still not physical, when it's really more like sexual foreplay as to sex, if somebody is going to cross all those boundaries and scream at me, yell at me, put me down, guilt trip me, and do whatever else it is trying to control me, if that doesn't work, physical abuse is very likely to occur after that. And so we want to put an end to it before it ever gets to that point. And just having that little piece of knowledge would have saved that woman from that indignity on that day. And from the months of misery she experienced in that relationship. And in the same way, I just think all of this, when we're talking about what is love, I want to go back to use love languages, but just to say in the sense of, if we really knew what love was, we would recognize when we see it not being played out, to recognize the counterfeit. Well, I'm sorry I hit you, but I only hit you because I love you, or I only yell because I care, or I only,
Maybe her love language was touch. I know it's a bad joke, but
that's a horrible joke. That was the meanest thing I've ever heard you say. Oh my God. So, what were you?
I can't defend that. It's just, I'm a horrible person. I'm going to say.
I would just wish we could get purgatory back. We need that concept. Burn all that out of him, Lord. So, I think it's what you were saying, though, that it's painful to be in these relationships, and it's confusing. And when you don't have clarity, when you don't have a North Star guiding you, when you don't have any training on what I think we all agree is one of the most important parts of life itself, having a loving relationship. It's the foundation of family. It's the foundation of our civilization, people being able to share their lives in loving, kind ways.
And having that evaporates ideas, I believe, like this is moving beyond the five love languages, it seems like it evaporates all these things that people are trying to find a quick fix for or something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I consider so much of this other stuff just really distractions from what is really common sense and plain as the nose on our face. Either the other person doesn't really love me, or they don't really have the capability of loving anybody.
Yeah.
And in which case they don't love me as well. But I'm just one in a series of people whose lives they're going to make miserable before they die. 19%. And that doesn't include, I mean, there's some overlap with all mental health diagnoses, but that doesn't include all the people out there who have drug and alcohol problems, or who are in the middle of a bipolar disorder that's left untreated, or the people with untreated schizophrenia, or any of the other things that are just really common. The most common of which is collectively the personality disorders. And so you do need to know a little bit about, well, what would that look like? I mean, what would the inability to give and receive love look like?
So that's more helpful, knowing that information.
Yeah. And it's so a little bit of mental health information is also part of a good sex education, because we would want to recognize the people who are candidates for a leading role in our lives, but who are really not going to be able to cut the mustard, as my grandmother used to say.
And what about those people, though, who do have those personality disorders? Like, what are they doomed to not have love, or are they doomed to? Can you not escape that, or is that something that's?
I think if they really thoughtfully could read the 5 love languages,
that would cure them.
No, I'm poking fun because some of my nearest and dearest clients who I love the most and loved working with, and it's been an honor to work with them. They are people who recognize there's a problem and they had the courage to do something about it. But there are people, and in today's political scene, there are a lot of them in the public eye, who are obviously incapable of giving and receiving love. They're terribly narcissistic. They're very ill, and we shouldn't make fun of them. But I think we poke fun partly as a way of coping with how uncomfortable we all are. There are people with narcissism so extreme that they have no interest whatsoever in getting over it. And the old-fashioned word that I think I still use is egosyntonic. It doesn't, when I have depression, that's ego dystonic. It bothers me that I'm depressed. I don't like being depressed. I want to be happy. And if you can help me with a pill or a therapy session or something, then yes, I want that answer. But for the person who has a serious case of antisocial personality disorder, or narcissism, or what we call the sociopath, where these traits are all mixed together, that individual typically has zero interest in ever overcoming this. And what are you going to do? I mean, life is short. We only live to be maybe 100 if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And you meet somebody, you fall in love, you realize, oh, they can't love me back. Are you going to guilt trip them into trying to go to a therapist? Are you going to threaten them? Say, if you don't go to a therapist, I'm leaving you. You can talk about it. And if they realize this is a problem and it's something I want to do something about, then they'll go do it. But I wouldn't suggest anybody out there wait years, for that, or even 1 year. I wouldn't suggest people, once they realize it, once they see it, I would say, no, the meter is ticking. And it's not accepting any more coins. You just got to, you run it out and then you got to go.
Yeah. So some people who do have the personalities, if they have the courage to face themselves and do the work, there is somewhat hope for them.
But tons.
But most of the time it sounds like they're like, nah, I'm good.
Well, part of that is the accursed mental health industry, because personality disorders can't be treated with a pill. They can't be cured with a pill or with medication, because we're talking about somebody who has an incomplete personality. And so they are incapable of doing this without expensive, long-term talk therapy, which can include group sessions, individual sessions. There's a huge cognitive component to this, but there's also a lot of luck involved, because we know that people who do well in personality disorder therapy, and listener, please know I'm not going to charge you any more for this information than our regular podcast price. People do better in therapy if genetically they are lucky enough to be born with a higher than average IQ. If they are genetically blessed with higher than average good looks, which I think speaks to, again, genetic endowment and the symmetry that creates better than average looks, also means there's something really good going on in their genome. And then lastly, if they can form a really good therapeutic bond with their therapist, they are much more likely to do well. And that it's the kind of therapy that's virtually impossible to be done on the cheap. I can't even imagine how that would be done. And because insurance and the United States government don't really cover this kind of treatment, it's really challenging.
Yeah.
It's really challenging, but it is out there. We do know what to do to help these individuals. It's just, but for the boyfriend or girlfriend or would-be mate who suspects this is going on, maybe to do some reading, do a little further research, really reflect on this, talk to your friends. And if you come to the conclusion that maybe even after talking to a therapist that, yeah, this is what I'm faced with, and they're not willing to go get therapy, just know that relationship is never going to change.
Yeah. So got a decision to make on that one.
Yeah, big one.
So going back to the love languages and also this capacity for love, aside from personality disorders, the general public, like how do you identify, or how can you define the capacity of love in a simple way that they don't need to go out and buy the book for? Like, how could they, like, what does it mean to be a person who has the capability of being a loving person?
Okay, so again, let's get back to the basics. We all know what love looks like, and we all know what manipulation looks like. Some of us, sadly, were unfortunate enough to even have parents or step-parents who didn't really love us, who were very conditional in their love. I'm talking about one of the simplest things for a person with a normal brain to perceive. Does this person really love me? Now, if you too are damaged, you who are listening to this, and you have early childhood trauma that's unresolved, and you find yourself with some compulsive suspiciousness that is really not your true nature, but you've learned to be compulsively, suspicious, you're going to have a hard time just relaxing and being loved. And you too might need to go get some therapy so you can participate in a loving relationship. But generally speaking, I think humans are really pretty good at, over time, spotting phonies and people who don't really love us. So it's not like there's any one behavior, because people are different and they can show love in different ways. And there are different kinds of relationships. I think there are professors out there in the world who love their students very deeply and really genuinely care about them. And you can tell. And then there are work relationships where people like two soldiers in the army who can really care about each other and the other people in their unit, and really care about all of the people in their branch of the service and care about their country. And you can see it's a genuine love that they have, along with all the joking and the bravadory. What is that word?
Bravado?
Yeah, the bravado, where we're boasting and we're going on. There's also, you can tell when there's genuine love, and you can tell when there's not. So your brain is so highly evolved that if you just let it do its job, the key thing, I think, is just recognizing two facts. Number one, people who are incapable of love do exist, so you got to keep an eye out for them. And number two, accepting that you have a need for love. You're a member of a social species, and loving and being loved is sort of our thing. It's the glue that holds us together, whether it's in a military unit, whether it's, you know, in a working relationship with someone over years, or whether it's in a relationship between two close friends, or in a romance and a lifelong commitment. If that love isn't there, then you're not going to get your needs met, and you've just set yourself up for eventually for sexually acting out, either criminally or in a civil case, like with some sexual harassment, or a simple case of simply violating your values by having affairs, flirting in a way that you really don't want to follow up on, and so you're flirting with people who are taking you seriously, but you're not really available. But this is how you get off on getting those needs met. We don't act out when we're getting our needs met. Mm-hmm. When we're happy and fulfilled, we're not acting out, because it's like, why would you go eat another meal when you're satiated from your last meal? It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So if you're not feeling loved, you're going to try to get some love in your life. And for some of us, that's going to mean flirting. For some of us, it's going to mean criminal acting out, or gross socially inappropriate behaviors like sexual harassment on the job. And there are many other ways as well. Living in a dream world constantly, we have many ways of doing this and trying to cope with it. But we're never going to get away from this. We are hardwired to need love in our lives.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's almost like an intuitive thing that we all know.
Mm-hmm.
But we were talking about in a different podcast how you kind of make sacrifices sometimes in relationships to force the love or keep the love, or
for the sake of the children,
for the sake of whatever
it is, for your religion. But every time I've talked to an adult who's in this situation, mm-hmm. Here's a thought experiment for everybody. If you're in a relationship like this right now, to just ask yourself, well, if you had a son or a daughter and years later they grew up and they got into a relationship just like yours, would you advise them to stay? And what I've experienced is that no one would ever do that to their children. And the difference between the advice you would give a child you love and the advice you withhold from yourself, mm-hmm. is what we call denial.
Mic drop. Yeah, I love that exercise. I mean, it is such a simple, clear-cut thing, but it seems like a lot of people can be. I was in denial at times.
Yeah, and it's super easy when you think about somebody else you really mm-hmm. care about, like your own child. But for some reason, it's so confusing when we're in it.
Yeah.
And I get that because I've been that guy, mm-hmm. where I was trapped feeling unloved, or I was the guy who was not doing the loving because mm-hmm. I wasn't really the right person.
Yeah.
And it's just so weird that we're either codependently trying to protect the other person from any kind of hurt whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We're just going to suck up some more years of their life in an unloving relationship.
Yeah.
Or we're going to stick around for more years that we could have been spending either happily living alone or dating somebody who might really love us.
Yeah. Man, 5 love languages.
Curse you, 5 love languages.
And then also too, like just going back to that really quick before we wrap up here. So if you are somebody who has the capability of loving, you match up with somebody who does as well. Everything that you're pouring into that relationship is just all love, and it's your time, your quality time, touch, words of affirmation, kindness. That stuff's happening, as well as an infinite selection of everything else. I mean, there's
even with that phrase they use in psychedelic journeys, mm-hmm. someone to watch over you and to hold space for you.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the most loving things a person can do for another person. And sometimes, like, if I were to go to prison, I know my partner would hold space for me, and there would be a room for me to return.
Yeah.
And love is the basis for that. We need to learn how to do that. And for those people, we were joking and laughing about people with personality disorders, but they're not usually very happy people, and they do want help. And they come in various levels of severity. But for all of us, whether it's a personality disorder or early childhood trauma, or we're just with the wrong person, I think there's so much clarity that comes from just remembering I need love, and I also need to give love, and I need to be with someone who can return that to me.
Yeah. And there you go. Now you don't have to read the book. So, all right. To wrap things up, we have a listener question. And again, if you have a question for Steve, visit stevening.com and fill out the contact form, and Steve can answer any question you want. So this question...
Wow, that's quite a guarantee.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the offer that we're putting on the table. So here we go. Here's the question. It seems like America has an epidemic of socially awkward, lonely men. Could you do a podcast on that? I'd really like to know what to say to help my younger brother. I know I'm not alone seeing this problem. Thank you.
Well, yes. We can do a podcast on that. That was the easiest question I've ever responded to. And I have known a number of my clients who fit this description, and it's just heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. And my empathy goes out to anybody who's going through this. And again, this is a fixable problem. It does take courage, and it takes a certain level of awareness. And maybe it'll even take family members like the one who wrote in to bring it up. But there's definitely a lot of help out there. And so, we can talk about that, because that is a part of managing sexuality intelligently. If I'm not capable of getting out of the house or connecting with other people, I'm not getting my needs for love met. Yeah. I'm definitely not managing my sexuality.
And that could go down the path of criminal behavior if you're not.
Absolutely. And if not criminal behavior, just misery.
Yeah.
And mental health challenges.
Great. So we will do a podcast on that soon. So stay tuned, or be on the lookout for that. And thank you all for listening. And thank you, Steve, as always.